Warning, the following program is extremely janky. Viewer discretion is advised.
That was the only example I could think of. That one's more of a
jockeys are small,
physics thing,
basketball players are tall, and CEOs are psychopaths. That's basically where you're going with this.
Like, this isn't happening because of industry conditions or because of, COVID really is affecting. No, it's happening because of yet another tech executive who's like, the metaverse. And it's makes no sense, means nothing to the consumer, and it's a dumb idea, and it costs people their jobs. So
you might not want to see it, but guess what? You're going to see it. I'm going to show you a picture of an old Polish man in a bathtub full of beer.
Back in fresh form, ready to go. Welcome back, everybody.
Paul Tassi again?
He's a games journalist.
Oh, okay.
One of the good ones.
Yeah, one of the good ones, yeah.
Yeah, he wrote this article. Epic's layoffs should be blamed on a Quixotic, like Don Quixote.
Yeah, I hear people say quixotic, even though it's Quixote. It's usually quixotic, which
is weird, right? It shouldn't be that. Oh, whatever the fuck.
But Quixotic sounds, it's all fucked, yeah.
On a quixotic pursuit of the metaverse. So Epic had these layoffs. They laid off like 1,000 people. Well, I guess it probably has
epic layoffs, eh?
Nice, dude. Nice. Got him. Back in fresh form. Ready to go. Welcome back, everybody. Yeah, they laid off 16% of their workforce, nearly 900 people.
Jesus.
Yeah. And Tassi writes in this article. It's a really good article. I highly suggest you read it. But he's basically saying like this isn't happening because of industry conditions or because of COVID really is No, it's happening because of yet another tech executive who's like, the metaverse, and it's bullshit, makes no sense, means nothing to the consumer, and it's a dumb idea, and it costs people their jobs. So they had this big spat with Apple because Epic was trying to, this not super related to the metaverse shit, but Epic was they make Fortnite, and they were trying to circumvent the app store to sell in-app microtransactions, because if you do it, you have to do it through the app store, and then Apple gets a cut, right? And they were trying to be like, no, fuck that. Like their argument, and actually their argument kind of makes sense, which is that Apple isn't doing anything to facilitate that purchase. They may be doing things to facilitate the downloading of the app and like regulating that space on their platform.
They're just rent seeking at that point.
Yeah, like if it's a microtransaction within the game, you're already in the game, you got the game, Apple did its thing. It really doesn't make sense for Apple to also take a cut of that microtransaction. Kind of weird.
Well, and it's not like Apple isn't like laying anything out for like server space or anything like that.
Yeah, it doesn't use any. I mean, it doesn't. It's purely,
so it's just pure rent seeking.
It's rent seeking. Yeah. So anyway, they started this legal case against Apple. I think they lost. I think it's over, and they lost because they circumvented the terms and conditions of the App Store. But they were calling it Project Liberty, and they ran this commercial, this YouTube video that was like, you remember the really, not remember, but have you seen, because it was before our time, but you've seen those really old Apple commercials where it's like a bunch of people in a room,
and then they're like throwing the thing. Yeah.
It was that, but it was a picture of a guy with an apple for a head, and he's on the screen, and it's like, yeah, we're resisting. It's just like, oh, I'm so fucking cringe. And they literally called it Project Liberty to be like fighting Apple against,
which is like, holy fuck. It sounds like, that sounds like some fucking far right militia in Idaho or some shit. Yeah. Project Liberty.
Yeah. What the
Project
fuck?
Christian Nation or what?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a pretty libertarian thing. Like, you know what? These bastards need to get off our backs so we can exploit the consumer in peace, right?
Well, yeah, and it's like, I think the reason Tassi brings it up in the article is he's like, Epic is being like, oh, we're fighting the monopoly of Apple, we're fighting against this big company, but it's like, and then a couple months later or a year later or whatever, you're laying off your employers, your employees, your frontline workers, because you made a shitty business decision, and none of the executives suffer for that. It's the frontline workers who get cut. And it's like, okay, so you are the big bad company. Like, that's you. You can't, that's.
Well, that's kind of what, that's the contradiction with any of these sort of like, and I'm not completely against the corporate activism or whatever you want to call it. Like corporations should take a stand when something's really bad or something that shouldn't be done. But that's not what we should expect from corporations. That's not what corporations exist to do. And there's something kind of inherently disingenuous when corporations, try and frame themselves as we're fighting for the little guy. It's like, no, you're fighting for your bottom line, dog.
Yeah, you're fighting for your shareholders.
Yeah.
Come on.
Which is like,
That's what you're supposed to do, but not to.
But let's not romanticize it. Let's not lie, because that'll only increase the degree of disillusionment with the capitalist system by saying, oh yeah, like we're doing something for you. It's like, no, you're fucking not.
Yeah. And then like just around the corner, because of this stupid fucked up metaverse shit, you lay off 16% of the whole company. It's like 900 people. It's like, okay, no, you are a bad guy. Like you are,
or at least you're gray.
Yeah.
Right. Like never like project. I mean, that's kind of the thing is that I don't really, like I'm all for the worker. And, I come from just like you. I think you're maybe a bit more pro-union than I'm pro-union, don't get me wrong. But like, I think like, I'm a bit more like, I have expectations of corporations that's how they behave. It's that they introduced that Project Liberty thing first. And then it's like, I wouldn't have thought anything about Epic laying off 900. It was okay. That sucks for 900 people, but that's what happens in business. And it's what they got to do is what they got to do, whatever. Not the end of the world. I don't really give it. I'm apathetic to that. But it's like, first you frame yourself as like these fighting for the little guys. Then you do that. Okay, now there's a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah.
And it was unnecessary. Like, I would not have given a shit had you not framed yourself as like this crusader for justice, right?
Yeah, it's stupid. So stupid.
So we've been off for a while.
Yeah, we've been off.
So I was out of town for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I was in, Calgary, Alberta. And then I came back and we kind of had a little bit of, there's a lot of shit going on in the world. So, we took another week off and here we are. But a lot has happened in the last couple of weeks here.
Yeah, that's an understatement of the century. Jesus. Yeah, you're not wrong. We should start with
pointing at the big elephant in the room.
Yeah, which is Palestine.
Yeah. Yeah.
God, where do I even begin? Like, what do I even say? It's so okay. So for the one person who's been living under a rock for a month, or they were,
feels like a month. It's only been 8 days.
It's only been 8 days. Yeah, Jesus Christ. Mentally, it's been months, but for the one person who's been living under a rock for a couple of weeks for the last 8 or 9 days, or whenever this airs, there was a terrorist attack in Israel where Hamas launched rockets at multiple, I don't know what you would even civilian locations.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
All over the place. Yeah. Indiscriminate with the intent.
Indiscriminately. And they also, I think, came from Gaza into Israel to kill people in Israel.
Mm-hmm. They're estimating between 2,000 and 3,000 militants made incursions into Israel.
Yeah.
And it was horrific.
It's horrific.
Horrific crimes, atrocities. I mean, that's really the only way you can talk about it. Like,
I don't think it. I don't know how much we should go into the detail of the actual atrocities committed. It's not super easy to talk about anyway. Just let it be known that there were terrible acts of violence against innocent people,
murder and rape, children, elderly people.
Yeah, it's indiscriminate.
Mass kidnappings. Right now, the civilian death toll in Israel is around 1,400, but that's set to still, some people I've read are saying that's set to still rise because they go through the process of identifying before they list. So we might see a death toll, all told, around 1,800. That's what I've heard. Don't hold me to that.
Citation needed.
I hope not. I mean, but yeah, so terrible. And then obviously this, it took a couple of days for the situation to be handled in the south, to get the Hamas terrorists pushed back into Gaza. The IDF has said that they, counted about 1,500 Hamas militants that they killed in Israel proper. And then since then, we've seen a reprisal air campaign and the beginning of the process of staging for a ground invasion of Gaza by the IDF. And alongside this, we've seen the biggest mobilization in Israel's history. 360,000 reservists mobilized over the course of like 4 days. Keep in mind, Israel is a country of a little under 10 million people, and they mobilized more people than Russia mobilized for their invasion of Ukraine, and Russia has a population of 160 million people. So just to give you an idea, pretty amazing imagery coming out of like plane loads of people. Like people just rush back to the country. You know, there's some people were posting these things of like being like pictures in Ben Gurion Airport, which is the international airport in Israel. Israel's so small, there is no. Most people might not know this. Actually, I think that there's an airport in Eilat now, but historically there is no domestic airline industry because there's one airport. That's how small of a country it is, right? Their airport is an inherently international airport. But there was imagery coming out of there where there was like huge line, like so many people, and a lot of people, like, you know, disinformation agents, you could say, and this is something we're going to talk about, is just how polluted the information environment around this whole situation is. But people are saying, oh, look, all of these, you know, Israeli Jews are all fleeing to their house in Brooklyn or whatever. And it was not the case. Those were all foreign nationals. We've actually seen a massive influx of Israelis coming back to the country in order to mobilize. So it kind of, you know, that's a complicated sort of thing. I got a lot to say just even in regards to that. But yeah, so we saw, you know, the Western world largely come out in support of Israel. At the same time, we've seen large street protests. Mixed. There's been large street protests in favor of, like, you know, in solidarity with Israel, large street protests in solidarity with Palestine. Frankly, large protests of people who have celebrated the violence, you know, especially on the left end of the political spectrum, which has been real eye-opening, right? So yeah, a lot's going on. And now, you know, we're in the situation where the United States has, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's two carrier battle groups that are now positioned off the
Lebanon.
Yeah. So there's like the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and the USS Gerald R. Ford, which are both super carriers, and they're there basically to disincentivize Hezbollah and Iran. So Hezbollah is a militant group in Lebanon from becoming involved and expanding the conflict. So yeah, it's fucking insane. It's an insane situation. There's, you know, questions about like massive failure by the Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu, massive intelligence failure. That's kind of where we're at. That's kind of the skinny on it, right? So, and now we're just waiting to see what happens. There's an increasing humanitarian crisis developing in Gaza as a result of reprisal, and as a result of, you know, Gaza is now the main battle space, really. We've seen 1 million people displaced in Gaza. 100,000 in Israel and about 1 million in Gaza. And the Israeli military has said that anybody north of a thing called the Wadi Gaza, which is about a third of the way down south in Gaza, anybody north of that line should go south. So we've seen a massive movement of people from Gaza. And that's the main population center. Gaza City is north of Wadi Gaza. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So, I mean, you know, I got a lot to say about this, but why don't you tell me about how you're feeling about all this?
It is eye-opening. That is a great way to put it. I think something that's bothered me a lot about the discourse surrounding what's happening is I think there's a lot of people who are they have very strong opinions with very little knowledge, with very little information. It seems there's this massive pressure, and I think especially this is present on the left, there's massive pressure to kind of publicly state your opinion and you know, confirm that your opinion right away and make sure everybody knows the side that you're on right now. And what I think it's led to is a lot of people just making really, you know, baseless and yet strong stances on things they don't understand. And so many people I've heard so many people say, this is simple. This is a simple situation. It's not that complex. It's not that complicated.
That's what Hassan was saying.
It's bullshit. It's fucking bullshit. Okay. I spent days reading about the history of this situation, and I still have only a fraction of the understanding that I think I actually need. Like, it's insane. It's insane to me that anybody could look at this situation and say, this is simple. This is not complicated. It is complicated. It's incredibly complicated. There's so many states involved. There's so many, there's so much history, so much time that has passed, so many events, so much context. It's insane. You can't possibly hope to have assessed enough information. It's yeah. There are parts of it that I think that are very easy things to say and easy things to understand. It's very easy for me to say that I condemn the
murder of children
and the elderly and innocents. And it's very easy for me to say that that conditions for certain Palestinian people are terrible, and that they are terrible as a large consequence of the actions of the Israeli government. It's very easy for me to point these things out and say these things are wrong. They're bad. They're wrong. What's not easy for me to do is to say, here's how we fix things. And what's not easy for me to do is to say, here's who is 100% evil and here's who is 100% good, because those people don't exist. They don't exist, not even nowhere. And so there's these really wild takes all over the place, the whole gamut. And it's like, I'm bewildered by the confidence that people can have with such little information. My career, I'm a software developer, and we, a huge part of being a successful software developer is you have to know what you don't know. And you have to know when it's appropriate to be confident. This is very common in junior software developers. They have an excess of confidence when they shouldn't. And senior developers pull them back in. This happened to me so many times with my mentors over the years. They say, no, like you think you know, but you don't. Take a step back. Take a step back and look at everything. You think you know, you don't know. And so I'm very comfortable with the idea of looking at a situation and saying, I don't know. I do not know. There's too much. And this is one of those situations where I've spent, like I said, days consuming media all across the spectrum, all the different opinions, all of the history, and I'm still
scratching the surface.
I'm just scratching the surface. I'm left confused and lost and depressed and just angst ridden and it's hard.
And that's only made worse by the really polluted and dangerous information environment that exists, not just around this topic, but in general in this moment. I'm a avid consumer of Twitter, or shitter, or X, or whatever we're calling it this week. I follow a lot of people that are Syrian dissidents. So they're critics of Bashar al-Assad and, by extension, Russia, who have committed terrible atrocities against the people of Syria. And one of the things that they've mentioned is how frustrated they are by people who are passing off footage from Syria of the victims of Bashar al-Assad and saying, here's images of children who were killed by white phosphorus by Israel in Gaza. And it's like, no, this is from East Ghouta in 2014. This has got nothing to do with that. And there's so much of that, so much falsehood, and so much, going back to what you said, interestingly, the talking about people who say it's simple, a lot of the people who say it's simple are people who they say it's simple, and as a result, that simplicity allows them to wash over atrocities. And I mean this on from both sides. But in this case, I'm talking primarily about people like we're talking about Hassan, who's basically saying, oh, this is simple. The history of this is simple, which is nonsensical. He's a fucking moron. The guy's a fucking idiot. Doesn't know jack shit. Sorry, that shit really bugs the hell out of me.
You're not alone, dude. You're not alone.
But it's simple, and this is why he can justify the murder of children and the rape of women and the kidnappings and the fucking beheadings and the I won't get into it, but violence of the sort that we have not seen since ISIS. One thing too is that this was the largest single day massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. So, and I think that sort of, the implications this has communally are kind of washed over, and especially on the left. Like, this has really been an eye-opening thing. You and I both identify as people more or less are on the left, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's been very, very eye-opening about this sort of illiberal tendency that is developing on the far left. But it's this campism and this willingness to, I'm a little lost for words, but it's kind of like, some of the phrases I saw on the internet, people saying, well, this is what did you think decolonization meant? Right? This is what decolonization looks like. And I'm not talking, this is before the reprisals. Like, there were people celebrating in the streets, and I'll tell you right now, it's one thing to be sympathetic and angered at the injustice of the lack of Palestinian self-determination, humanitarian cost, and, for lack of a better term, criminality of the continued occupation, right? And the behavior of the Israeli occupation. But to go out onto the street and celebrate the murder of innocent civilians who, like people at a peace concert, peace activists who have been kidnapped, who have been tortured, widespread, and not just by, Hamas is not a group that has claimed, we're doing this for the sake of freedom and self-determination and justice. No, it's a genocidal group. They're theocratic fascists. There should be no space on the left for them whatsoever. But for some reason there is, right? And in campuses in the West. And so it's really, it's eye-opening about the really toxic and like acerbic place we're in politically, right? And we shouldn't pretend. We talked about it before. We talked about it, we discussed this before. I mentioned how, the dehumanization that we see around the Titan submersible thing, right? And I was telling people, hey, listen, like, sure, it's all fun and games when it's like 5 billionaires or whatever. I mean, I didn't think it was fun and games then either, because I don't think we should be making light of death in such a manner. But this form of like dehumanization and categorization of people is, it will have consequences here, and it already is. There's a couple of situations I want to point out. There's been a massive rise in anti-Semitic acts in the West. There was also, I don't know if you heard about this. This is a very disturbing thing. There was a Palestinian American child and his mother who were attacked. The child, his name Wadia Al-Fayoum, he was murdered by his landlord. Just for a 6-year-old boy. I guess the emotions that are brought up by this guy, and it also relates to the information environment, because the guy was this guy named Joseph Chuba or something like that, and immediately people started coming out and saying the Jewish Zionist landlord killed this kid, and the guy's like a Polish Catholic, like the guy's not Jewish at all, and it's like, holy fuck, like some like it's like crazy. It's crazy. And I was just reading just before the show started, there was a shooting in Brussels. Two Swedish nationals were killed by a guy who went out on Facebook beforehand and said, I'm doing this to avenge the Muslim lives lost. So we see this escalating violence across the West, and it's fucking insane. It's fucking insane. I don't know what else to say about it. And it's you made a really good point about, it's people who, like, I can understand Palestinians in the diaspora and Palestinians at home getting out on the street and being enraged to the point of, and this isn't to justify violence, but I can understand violent rhetoric and violent feelings. Same among Jews, right? Because, they have like sort of a dog in this fight, if you will, right? This kind of, they are seeing their own humanity challenged every day, right? But it's the people I see that are just have no real connection to it other than their own ideological predilections and really their own, frankly, their socialization and the social group that they're part of. Like it's almost like a fashionable thing to wear, whether it be the Israeli flag or the Palestinian flag. And it's just, that's what really kind of scares and disgusts me, that it's like what the fuck do you care? Like, I mean, you should care. I don't mean care, but like, where do you get off with such little knowledge and with no skin in the game, making these, big black and white statements, right? And saying, justifying the murder of people, right? So yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So
I think, and again, you and I are aligned in this. We could not be any clearer that there are multiple bad things happening. There are a lot of bad things happening, and those bad things are being perpetrated by various different
actors.
Many actors. The Israeli state, Hamas, like Iran, like it's all over the place. It's not, and I couldn't be more clear about the fact that you and I see that there is no party, there's no faultless party, there's no blameless party in this conflict. There are things that need to be changed from all sides. And this isn't one of those feckless, useless, pissant, centrist positions where it's like, well, everybody's a little bit wrong. Like, no, this is a real complicated problem with real complicated actors. And we can sit here and say, like I said before, we can sit here and say, I denounce these acts of terrorism, these attacks on innocents, women and children and elders. And we can also say that, like, we can talk about illegal occupation, and we can talk about, human rights crisis, humanitarian crisis. And the reason we can do that is because neither one of us has decided there's a side we need to be on. Because this isn't about sides. This isn't about choosing a camp. This isn't about red team versus blue team. This is about, what are your foundations? What are the terms that you live your life by, and how do they fit into this situation? And the terms that I live my life by is to minimize human suffering. Period. Minimize human suffering. Not minimize the suffering of the Israelis or the Palestinians, or it's to minimize human suffering, period. And because that is my perspective on this, it's really complicated. It's really hard, because you have to acknowledge, like you said, that both the Palestinians and the Israeli Jews have a right to self-determination. They have that right. And that this isn't the Sith and the Jedi.
Yeah.
This isn't, this isn't the bad guys and the good guys. That's not what this is. This is a very deep, complex situation that is older than nearly everybody participating in the discourse. Nearly every person that I've seen participating in this discourse, this conflict is older than them. It has been a conflict since before they existed. And yet they portray themselves as moral experts, as authorities on this subject matter. When, like you said, not only do they not have all of the context, they don't even have, I shouldn't say they have no skin in the game, because I believe that, although I'm not living in the Ukraine, I have a vested interest in the Ukraine winning that conflict because of the global consequences. Just like and this is a similar situation where, although I don't live in Gaza or Israel, I have a vested interest in this conflict being resolved as a global citizen.
Yes.
So I won't say they have no skin in the game, but comparatively no skin. Comparatively, vanishingly little skin in the game. And it's like, I think it really comes from this deep-rooted societal stigma around incorrectness and being wrong about something, and having to admit that you're wrong about something, and having to take time and realize that you have something to learn in a situation. Is that you can't come into a situation and expect to be right all of the time. You have to accept that you will not be right. It's rule number one. It is literally rule number one that we have is epistemic humility. And that means in a situation like this, you have to you have to acknowledge that. You have to acknowledge that you aren't God. You aren't an omniscient, all-seeing, all-knowing being. You're flawed. You have faults. You have missing information.
Well, and I think you brought up a really good point about, what is a good starting point, right? And the best starting point, as far you said it already, but I'll restate it, is recognizing the legitimate national aspirations of both groups, right? Which many people almost seem unable or unwilling to even do, right? And seek to delegitimize the other side, right? And if we can't start from there, like, this will never be resolved except through violence. This can only be resolved through violence if we do not accept both people's national aspirations as legitimate, right? I think as well, there's a degree to which we have to recognize the global and international nature of this conflict and how this conflict is being inflamed by parties outside of the conflict itself who have a vested political interest in its outcome from geostrategic points of view, but don't have the actual human skin in the game, right? Mm-hmm. Whether that be, in this case, I'm primarily thinking of Iran, right? We talk about both parties or whatever, and when we're saying both parties, we mean Israelis and Palestinians. Mm-hmm. We don't mean the Israeli state. We don't mean Hamas. We mean two peoples, right? But I think that it can be said that there are inherently illegitimate positions, right? The position of Hamas and what Hamas represents is intrinsically illegitimate.
Their stated position. I just want to be clear that you're not ascribing this to them.
No, it's in their constitution.
It's open, public. They're
a genocidal, theocratic, fascist regime that intends to murder all the Jews.
And this isn't an interpretation. This is their they
say it outright.
It's their doctrine.
Yeah, it's their doctrine. And same with that. Far right elements in Israel who are becoming more and more empowered the longer that this goes on, they're equally illegitimate too.
Yeah, people like the ethno-nationalists.
Yeah, exactly. Like
it's their open stated doctrine.
Yeah, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. These are both of these elements on who I do not think really constitute the main of either group. Their positions are illegitimate because they don't recognize the humanity of the other side. They don't recognize the legitimate aspirations,
like the right of self-determination.
The right of self-determination and the need to find a real healthy, non-violent resolution to this, right? So, as dark as this moment is, I actually have a lot of hope. I have hope that, it's going to be a difficult several weeks or even months. And what we're going to see, the humanitarian, I'm worried, the international community needs to get more actively involved in the humanitarian situation in Gaza and needs to stabilize the situation, especially in the south of Gaza, where people are now being displaced towards because of the conflict in northern Gaza. But as we can see, and frankly, my position is Israel is in its right to defend itself and to destroy Hamas. And I don't see how that can be gotten around. And when people, rightfully criticize the military actions often of Israel, they often don't really answer this question of, well, what do they do? Especially when we're talking about an organization, Hamas, that has integrated military infrastructure alongside and within civilian infrastructure in order to maximize destruction of their own people. Because it's a death cult. It's a death cult.
And that like, if I obviously Hamas has probably not signed any Geneva conventions or anything, but that is a violation of international law.
It is a violation of the laws of armed conflict.
A clear violation,
for sure. And it's a violation. This is where things kind of get confused, And this doesn't give Israel carte blanche to just fucking drop bombs anywhere it wants, not whatsoever.
No.
But there are laws to war. There are laws to war, and I think a lot of people have in their mind, because they imagine Israel as this inherently illegitimate, genocidal, evil state. They imagine that everything that Israel is doing is like instantly people are saying they're committing genocide. People shouldn't be throwing around the word genocide like that. I don't think people understand. And not only that, people need to recognize we can't even really see into what's happening in Gaza. And this is a complex thing. Again, I'm not an expert in the laws of armed conflict. I'm not an expert in the Geneva Conventions, okay? And I also don't have access to official Israeli military doctrine and the decisions that are being made by the, chiefs of staff, right? And I also and then beyond that, we don't have anything more than reporting from Hamas in regards to what's being hit and when and who's being hit and how. There is the fog of war over this whole thing.
And just sorry to interrupt you, but also the thing about the Geneva Conventions, and this is some old edgy meme, but it's only a convention to the parties that signed it. It's to everyone else, it's the Geneva Suggestions, and that's barbaric, obviously, but it's I think it was. God, I can't even believe I'm going to say I'm quoting Ben Shapiro right now. Jesus Christ, what is happening in the world? But I think it was Ben Shapiro who said that there's this strange narcissism that we have in the Western world where we think that everyone thinks like we do. We think that because if we have some cultural, repugnance of violence against children or violence against innocents or women or something, that everybody must think that way, and that we think a certain way, therefore everybody must. And it's clear that Hamas does not, they don't subscribe to that.
Quite the opposite. They subscribe specifically to the attacking of innocent civilians.
Yeah.
For the same reasons that we think it's repugnant, they think it's effective, right? And so I think that's a very key thing. As much as there is blame to go around, I think one thing that needs to be recognized is this is ISIS-style behavior, right? When the international community came together and created a coalition to destroy ISIS, which was Russia and America and Iran, and everybody was on the same fucking side in the ISIS fight. And that was a bloody, disastrous fight, but it was a necessary fight. I mean, the aerial campaign saw 50 or 60,000 people killed at least. We saw so many people being displaced. The city of Mosul was, which was the second largest city in Iraq, was, destroyed virtually completely, and that's the level of destruction we're going to be seeing in Gaza. And, yeah, it's just, it's a dilemma. That's the best way I can put it. Is it's a dilemma. It's not something that is easily soluble. It's something that is, damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's a no-win scenario in many ways. For Israel, for the Palestinian people, for America, for everybody. It's a no-win scenario. Other than the agents of chaos, right? I mean, I would argue that this isn't a no-win scenario for Vladimir Putin. And I don't subscribe to the conspiracy theories that Russia had some direct and first-hand input into this. Although I'm not suggesting that Russia isn't, supporter of Hamas and other groups. But just generally speaking, the fighting that we see on the streets of Western cities between people who are for and against or what have you, and the cleaving that we're seeing, this benefits people that want to see democratic societies destroyed, right? And so we need to really have a clear-eyed view of what it is that we expect of ourselves and our societies, right? And that's why I think it's really important to really remain stuck on that, the legitimate aspirations of both people, and also how do we minimize human suffering, and how do we, above all else, the number one thing is to support and maintain human dignity and the dignity of all people, right? And so, yeah, it's going to be a rough couple of months. I have hope that, we see, as I've already said, but I'll say it outright, Benjamin Netanyahu's a fucking goof, and the current far-right government that actually isn't really the current government now that there's a unity government, but they still, these forces in Israel, I think that this has irreparably harmed them, which is a good thing for world peace because, like I said, this movement within Israeli politics is a intransigent, frankly, anti-human movement, right? A movement that does not recognize the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people and actively suppresses and frustrates that aspiration. I think that movement has been irreparably harmed, and I think that we're going to see an Israeli public. My hope is, the Israeli public will see that a resolution is necessary, a real fair resolution, whatever that might look like. But then there are other roadblocks to that too. But I've also seen, Mahmoud Abbas, who took a while to come out, has now come out and basically unequivocally condemned Hamas's action. So Mahmoud Abbas is the head of the Palestinian Authority, which is sort of the other major party in Palestinian internal politics, right? This is his party is Fatah. It's the party of Yasser Arafat. It's the party that, alongside the Israelis, there was a lot of hope in the 90s and even into the 2000s for peace to be actually achieved. And it was between these two parties. And it's the far right in Israel and Hamas in Palestine that has been the biggest impediment and frustrator of those things, alongside, like I said, international interference.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that's really hard about this too, which again, like if you're listening to this and you have a strong stance either way, and you wholly endorse one party or the other, please, I implore you to just sit and think for a little bit and just, really learn about the situation and really accept that there is no one without blame. And I'm not interested in playing the trauma Olympics. I'm just not. I'm not interested in measuring, like X lives against Y lives. I'm just not interested in that. I don't think that's productive. I don't think there's anything to be gained from saying, well, they killed 500. We only killed 450. Like, I don't see the value in doing that. I don't think anyone's going to get anywhere. It's just an eye for an eye. That's the whole point of the justice system, is that, at least the Western justice system, is that, God, I think this was actually I'm like quoting all the weirdest people right now. I think it was a Jordan Peterson thing. I don't know what the hell's going on with me, but I think that I don't know. This was just his explanation of it. It's not, law or anything, but he was giving this kind of analogy of one of the benefits of the justice system. One of the many benefits of the justice system is that it alleviates you of the responsibility of vengeance.
Yes.
And it alleviates you, the citizen, of the responsibility of getting justice and also figuring out what justice actually looks like.
Justice becomes arbitrary and ruled by emotion and by, tribal affiliation. And
you take one of ours, we take two of yours.
Yes.
You take four of ours, etc. I think that was kind of the analogy that he made. I don't even know where I was fucking going with that, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is, like,
recognize the humanity of everybody involved.
Yes.
Like, of the peoples involved.
And separate people from their, separate Hamas from the Palestinians, separate the ultranationalists in the Israeli government from the Israeli people, separate these actors that have illegitimate positions positions such that there is no possible mutually successful outcome that supports those positions. Those parties need to be separated from the people as a whole, because if you don't, you can't hope to succeed in ending conflict. You can't hope to reach a conclusion. And I think that's just not happening in a lot of the Western dialogue that I'm seeing. It's people are incapable of recognizing that, you can say free Palestine and that Hamas are terrorists. You can
both of those things. Yes,
both of those things can be true.
And in fact, realistically, not recognizing the latter makes your belief in the former meaningless.
Yeah.
Because both those things, like, unless you believe in genocide, right? And that's kind of the thing is coming back to, what are our fundamental beliefs? What are our fundamental beliefs around human dignity and human life and the legitimate aspirations and grievances of human beings? And you cannot, you need to center your thought and conversation on that. Really do. So,
and that applies globally. That, I can say, that I support the Israeli people and that Netanyahu's a fucking goof.
Yeah.
Like, I can say both those things. Both those things are true. So, yeah, it's
well, and I would make a similar argument that I made about Hamas. I mean, obviously, I'm not claiming that Benjamin Netanyahu has committed the same forms of atrocities per se, but in terms of the intransigence and the anti-humanity of the position of the far right in Israel is one that equally makes peace and justice
untenable.
Exactly.
Well, I think, I was going to say we've said all we have to say. That's definitely not true.
The case.
That's definitely not the
case.
But I think we've said all that we probably should say for now.
For
think
now.
Just to kind of close on that topic.
We had to talk about it. It's a difficult conversation.
It's important. It's an important conversation.
Well, and I think that we would be not fulfilling our duty in terms of the mission of our project if we were to try and gloss over it for convenience.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to want to do that because it's polarizing. Everybody's going to watch this and 90% of people will say we're fucking wrong one way or the other. Whatever. Perfect. That's fine. That's the way it is. But, speak truth to power. Speak bravely, right?
Speak bravely.
What's that rule? Something. That was one of the rules.
I can't remember which one it is.
So not that, the bravery that, I think that we need to recognize that this form of bravery it pales in comparison to the bravery of the Palestinian people, the Israeli people, right in this moment.
Yeah.
Is necessary in this moment. Again, as much as we feel skin in the game, there's people who are fighting for their lives and their livelihoods and their human dignity and their children's future. Right. So, yeah. So anyways, let's I got a bit more of a positive, some news from this week. It just happened yesterday or the day before.
Let's hear it. Give me the dub.
So Poland had their parliamentary elections.
Okay.
And so Poland has been the government in Poland has been a party called, in English, it's called Law and Justice. Their Polish.
Let me guess.
Yeah. Their Polish language acronym is PIS, so I call them the Piss Party.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Fucking piss boys is what they are. A bunch of fucking piss boys. Okay.
Okay. All right.
And yeah, they won the most seats in parliament, but they won nowhere near the capacity to actually form government. The coalition of opposition parties will form the next government. And this is a real good thing, I would argue, for European politics, for the fight against this surge of populist and anti-institutional politics that we see and anti-democratic politics that we see. I mean, it serves as a really good counterbalance against the recent election in Slovakia, where I forgot the party's name. Fico is the guy who's forming the next government, but fuck that guy. But Poland was one of these countries that were kind of moving towards a further and further more authoritarian or authoritarian light kind of governance model, kind of along the lines of Hungary or Turkey. The PIS party, they actually actively use state media to attack their rivals in the election. They've passed, I don't know if they've passed or in the process of passing judicial legislation to change the judiciary so that the courts couldn't challenge the decisions of the government, which is a key element of any democratic system, is that it's an anti-majoritarian thing that is necessary, that the rule of law is above majoritarian politics, basically. So this is kind of the context that we see there. And I think it's good for Ukraine too. You know, the PIS have actually been pretty strong allies for the most part of the Ukrainians. So I don't want to confuse that. They've been unlike Hungary, but I think that because they represent this anti-institutional and authoritarian movement in Poland, they are kind of broadly part of the same forces that, you know, ultimately are on the same side as Russia in that sense. I'm not saying that they're pro-Russian. They're not. But it's a bit more complex than that. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, that's really happy news. You know, those piss boys got fucking flushed. Flushed the piss boys, right? And
Poland dub.
There's a thing I'll put it up immediately around this time, but I don't know if you remember who Lech Walesa was.
No.
Solidarność was this movement during the Soviet period where Polish workers, starting at I think it was the Vladimir Lenin shipyards in Gdansk, Poland. Basically, it was a union movement.
Sorry, they're called the Vladimir Lenin.
That's what it was called. That's what it was called in the Soviet period.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying
it's not called that no more.
I got
all
confused.
the statues are down, buddy. Don't worry. Yeah, no.
I was a little confused there. I was like,
no. This is like 83. This is like 83. So Lech Walesa was like.
I was like, these piss boys are something else. Jeez.
No, they're very. I mean, everybody in Polish politics basically is anti-communist. So because of their experience with communism, Poland's got a really interesting and very many ways tragic history. Not just in the 20th century, but for the last couple of centuries. Very interesting country, very interesting history. But anyways, Lech Walesa, one of the things that I saw floating around on the internet, it wasn't from recently, but it was Lech Walesa, who's like the symbol of this movement, who's actually been a critic of the PIS party in the most recent years. It was a picture of him like taking, like he's in a bathtub of beer. He's taking a bath in beer.
What the fuck?
Like this fat old Polish guy in a big bathtub full of beer. I just thought it was the funniest shit ever. And he's a G. So yeah, like that, you know, you might not want to see it, but guess what? You're going to see it. I'm going to show you a picture of an old Polish man in a bathtub full of beer.
If you had to see it, damn, so do we.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I've seen, frankly, so much horrific imagery and so much that was like sweetness for all the sour.
It's eye bleach. Have you heard that saying before?
I haven't, but I understand it completely. And yes.
It's a subreddit it's what you expect. Little, videos of puppies and little kids,
toddlers be like, and shit. Yeah.
Tumbling down a slide and be like, ooh, like shit like that.
Or what about the cop slide? You ever seen the cop slide?
No.
In Boston, where there's this fucking cop that comes down this slide and he comes out fucking flying down this thing, man. Everyone's like, okay, this guy must have just launched himself at the slide. Like, people are saying, I think that this is a workers fucking comp thing. I'll show you the video later. I'll definitely put it up. It's fucking hilarious. So I could see that being eye bleach for some, especially anti-cop people, I guess. But
yeah, even just when somebody falls down and isn't really permanently hurt by it, it's funny.
Yeah, generally
it's
speaking,
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if I'm walking and I take a tumble and I get up, you're gonna be like, "Oh shit, are you okay?" Like, "Oh damn!" Like it's pretty funny, nobody's actually really hurt. Everything's all good.
It's funny. It's one of those things that we just naturally like a kid. Now, granted, kids are probably like little babies. They don't have like a developed moral system, so I guess they also have a capacity to have kind of a cruel sense of humor. But a kid sees somebody fall, like that's what you do. You pretend, "Oh, I fucked up," and the fucking kid's like, "All right."
It's really weird. Actually, I think there's some weird kind of evolutionary psychology going on because my kid, if he now let me explain this properly before you make any assumptions or anything, but if he's playing around and he takes a little tumble and he like tips over and he's okay, he's not in danger, he's not concussed, I don't have to worry about his well-being. He's just uncomfortable. Something happened, he tumbled over, he was uncomfortable, he got scared, whatever, and he starts crying. My initial reaction is to laugh, and I think it's relief. It's like oh, okay, he's not hurt. Like, oh my goodness. Like, because there's been times where something happens and I'm like, I genuinely am like, I have to make sure he's okay.
Like when you almost killed that cat.
I wasn't going to kill a cat. Don't talk about the cat. We don't know how to talk about the fucking cat. I'm like smashing my dish around here.
But I mean, that was a good example of like you reacting differently.
Yeah, because
where
I thought I was like, my child's in danger.
In danger, yeah, exactly.
So like if it's a situation where it's like, okay, I really need to make sure he's okay, then I'm like, it's like very serious kind of. I call it I go into drill sergeant mode. It's like where I do this sometimes with just other generic things where it's like, you know, I have some responsibility I have to fulfill and I really fucking don't want to do it. So my coping mechanism is I go into this mode of just like, okay, there's no other option but doing this thing right now. And so I'm just going to shut my mouth and go complete robot mode and just do it and get it over with. And it's very hard for my wife because she sees me and she's like, oh God, is he upset? Like, is he angry? Like, what's going on? He's completely blank. Cause normally I'm like, I joke around. I'm a funny guy.
Yeah.
So I go into that mode and she's like, oh God. But like, it's kind of similar to that where it's like, you know,
it's crisis mode.
Yeah. Crisis mode. Exactly. Yeah.
And part of it too, going back to what you're saying about laughing when the kid falls, children, and I think you were kind of leading up to this, but children are kind of like looking for how you react into how they should react.
Mm-hmm.
So if you treat everything as a catastrophe, the kid's going to be like, oh no, I'm really
big
hurt.
Time, dude.
Versus like, you know, you laugh. The kid's going to be like, oh shit, this shit's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Bada bang, like.
Yeah, that's hugely true. Yeah. It's very much like, you know, we always say tumble. We say, oh, took a tumble. Oh, little tumble. Like, oh, little. Like, we are still, as parents, in that moment, we're making that distinction right away. Snap distinction. Is he okay? Yes or no? Right away. Like, that's the very first thing that happens in your brain. And it's like, as soon as that is resolved, it's like immediately I'm just like, I laugh. And it's not like, you know, you fucking stupid little baby. It's like, I genuinely think it is like an evolutionary.
Walk much?
Yeah. First day in the new body, bud. Like, well, first year, pretty close, Dad. Yeah. Jesus. Yeah, but I genuinely, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that it's an evolutionary reaction. That it's a very core, like, you know, it's like your brain kind of, you know, it's like fight or flight, right? Fight or flight happens. Fight or flight is a, you know, it's an inner, you know, primordial reaction, right? That we just haven't gotten rid of. It just has not gone away. Just we can't. Like, it probably is going to be there for a long fucking time. And it's kind of like that. I think I posit that, you know, you make that snap distinction, and as soon as you realize the kid is fine, it's like, oh, okay. And you just kind of like, oh, haha, he just fell. Whew, like everything's fine. And it's like, yeah, it's it's a little weird because you wouldn't think like, why is he laughing? Like his kid just fell over and he's crying. Why is he laughing? But it's like, I'm not laughing at my son. That's ridiculous.
It's
That's
not a laughter of cruelty.
No, it's like
the foibles
it's like,
of, it's catharsis.
Yeah, it's like, you know, oh, it's a little kid doing a little kid thing. If he, God forbid, something happened and he was actually hurt, and there's something I need to do about it, and there's no laughter happening. That it's action, pure action. But because that's not the situation, it becomes this kind of this innocent, like you said, it's a foible. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, it's just like, you know, it's like a little, it is what it is.
Well, and everything can't be a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Right. Like things need to be kept within bounds. And there's also an element too, where you see this in cultures. Like, you know, this is kind of the root of, you know, people talk about Jewish humor, right? Where it's kind of like you use humor to come to terms with adversity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, you know, even in times where it is like, all right, like, how are you making a joke? Like nurses, the dark humor that nurses tell,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like people who aren't in that context are like, okay, that's fucking morbid. Like that's fucked up. But it's like, this is human beings need to find a way to cope and get to the next day. And it's one of these things, you know, it's interesting we bring this up, but that's one of the things that makes me hopeful even about this terrible situation we see erupting in the Middle East is that human beings have been through this sort of thing before. I've been through worse. Have seen worse than this. Maybe not, you know, for the people directly involved, but for the world, like in terms of scale and scope, we've been at very dire times in our history. And we've not only have we made it through, but not only have we survived, but we've thrived.
prospered.
Yes. So I think it's important to keep that in mind and really like, you know, not allow everything to be catastrophized.
Mhm.
So what is the next thing we want to talk about here, buddy?
Well, damn, it wouldn't be a citation needed podcast if we didn't talk about Activision Blizzard King.
Yeah.
So let me just pull something up for you.
Sure.
So this is an article from Bloomberg. It says Microsoft Activision's $69 billion pact. That nice isn't in the title. It's an involuntary childlike reflex that I have now.
69.
Nice. Got him. Microsoft Activision's $69 billion pact. Why does it say pact? I don't know. Cleared by UK is the key part of this headline. Is that the deal has been cleared by the UK regulatory body. I think it's the CMA. I think it's called. So their $69 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard was approved by the UK competition watchdog, removing the final major global regulatory hurdle that stood in the way of the biggest ever gaming deal completing. So it's happening. It's going down. Blizzard released this, I don't even know what you would call it, like a hype trailer, it was just like a YouTube video, and it was like it was kind of cringy, it was kind of cheesy, but at the same time I was like, fuck, whatever. Like, it was basically a compilation of various games from Microsoft first party studios, and then various Activision Blizzard games, and the characters in them, like quotes from them chopped up to be like one of them is like, "Is this our home now?" And the other one is like from one game, and the other quote is like, it's like, "We're a family," or I don't know, some whack shit like that.
Yeah,
but it was like basically a bunch of clips from different games chopped up to be like, oh, we're all just one big cozy Microsoft family. It was like, oh my god, it was just galactic cringe. But at the same time, a little cringe never killed anybody.
Oh, fucking rights.
So I just thought that was really funny. But yeah, it's and I still am I'm a little bit on the fence about this whole situation. I haven't really taken the time to like really, really think about whether or not this is a ultimately good or ultimately bad thing for the consumer, mainly. I'm leaning towards yes. Because of some of
it is a bad thing.
That it is a good thing.
Oh, okay.
That is a good thing. I'm not super settled on it, but the reason I'm leaning towards it is that as part of the effort to have the deal approved, Microsoft has made certain concessions. Now, I think that they should, I would have preferred if they made more concessions, but that's kind of the FTC's fault for not really doing their job very effectively in this situation. But like, for example, they've committed to the next 10 years of Call of Duty non-exclusive. They've committed to putting Call of Duty on more platforms that it's not already on, like Sony's PlayStation streaming service and like Nintendo's consoles, little things like that. I think they could have done more, but seeing that they've done anything like that at all is reassuring to me. I'm super like Phil Spencer. I'm the head of Xbox. I'm super like
sussy about.
I'm
that.
so sussy because like I used to have a really strong opinion of him, and then I started to, as more and more information came out of the FTC case, it's like, oh man, it's really, you can't just trust CEOs. I know they're people. CEOs are people too. What a weird fucking take. You're like, oh god, technically.
Technical people.
What happened to seeing the human? Come on, remember the human. But at the same time, the people who make their way into those positions are selected for.
Yes, very much so.
Like we jockeys are small. Like horse jockeys are tiny people for a reason.
I went to the horse races, by the way, when I was in Calgary.
Did you?
And
Yeah?
I can tell you, in order to work at the fucking, I think it's called Century Downs, you have to be like 5 feet or lower. Like I swear to God, I was like, oh fuck,
Yeah.
I felt like I was towering. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
That was a little. I mean, that was the only example I could think of. That one's more of a
but jockeys are small,
physics thing.
Basketball players are tall, and CEOs are fucking psychopaths. That's basically where you're going with this.
We select for certain characteristics in people who are successful in these positions. So
basically, we should see the human in people, but we select for people who do not see the human in people for these kind of positions.
Exactly.
Not exclusively and not entirely. And we don't select for it even necessarily explicitly as such. It's more of like a institutional selective process. But we see that in politics as well. And I would say that we see it almost explicitly. And I don't want to get us off track, but I mean, if you look at the emergence of, really narcissism in politics, we see this where we select for narcissistic traits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that speaks to the rise of people like Donald Trump.
One thing about Phil Spencer, I will say that is a point in his column is he's one of the few like executives of a gaming company that I've seen who seemingly based on all the evidence plays a lot of video games. There's been a lot of stuff that's come out about him. Like I think I saw a Reddit post recently or some interview or something where somebody ran into him in a video game, and his Xbox account is public. It's on his Twitter profile or something, so you could see one of the things you could see on a public Xbox account is achievements and when you get them. And somebody was playing Fallout 76 of all games, which by all accounts is not an incredibly popular game nowadays. Now this might have happened earlier this year before Starfield came out. I think it did. But regardless, somebody was playing Fallout 76 and they ran into somebody who in game was giving them items and stuff and interacting with them. And one of the achievements in the game is if you give another player a certain number of stim packs, you get an achievement for it. You trade them to them or something, or drop them on the ground. I can't remember how it works, but they suspected that this was Phil Spencer, because they had the same username or screen name. And they posted this video and they correlated it to his public Xbox account. And at that same time, he got the achievement for doing that thing, giving another player stim packs or whatever. So they could positively, now, unless there's some big conspiracy where he fucking pays somebody else to play on his account for him, but Fallout 76, you're going to pay somebody to play that game? It just, I find it very likely that he actually does play video games. He actually is a consumer of the product that he works with, which is, in my experience, massively contrary. I don't think Bobby Kotick's played a fucking Blizzard game in his life. That guy doesn't even look like he has ever touched a controller.
His name's Kotick's?
Kotick, Bobby Kotick.
Oh, okay.
Actually, he's the Blizzard, Activision Blizzard CEO. And actually, some really good news about that is that it came out. I wish I knew who I was citing for this. Can I remember who it was? No, I can't fucking remember. We'll throw it on the screen. But it came out that it was reported that Bobby Kotick will be staying on only until January 2024 with Blizzard, and then he's gone, which is huge because he's been the CEO at Blizzard for 35 years or something crazy, some crazy number like that. It's a big number, whatever it is. And a lot of people attribute a lot of the downfall of Blizzard in recent history to him directly. He also babbles on about the fucking metaverse in every interview he does, which just drives me crazy. Who the fuck are stop, man. No. No. Stop trying. What's that? It's like that Mean Girls meme. Stop trying to make metaverse happen. It's not gonna happen.
It's not gonna fucking happen, buddy.
So that actually I think is a bit of good news for Blizzard, is that Bobby.
So this is a merge between Microsoft and then Blizzard Activision King.
So Microsoft is purchasing Activision Blizzard King. So it's all the Call of Duty games, it's all the World of Warcraft, Overwatch,
40% of the market, basically.
Yeah, huge chunk of the gaming market. So, which I mean, again, this is one of the contributing factors as to why I'm not actually super settled on whether or not it's a good thing, because it's pretty close to monopoly.
Yeah,
it's getting up there. Call of Duty,
fucking Sony's getting cucked hard on this one.
Yeah. So, although, I mean, PlayStation is no stranger to forcing exclusives, right? So, although Microsoft bought Bethesda, and then they made fucking Starfield exclusive, which sucks.
It really sucks, actually.
But then again, if you look at how Starfield's being reviewed right now, I don't think PlayStation fans lost out on much. I still haven't picked it up, by the way.
That's what happened with 76 too, and then it got better, didn't it? Like, I didn't play 76, but I heard
it got better. Yeah, I mean, it's still
kind of a fucking
it's
shitter,
still a bit of a jank fest. Yeah. I mean, it's like,
well, it's Bethesda. It's got to be a bit of a jank fest.
Yeah,
there's got to be a little no clipping between shit.
This is like a real jank fest. Like you know, like in Skyrim when you walk into a pot and it glitches out and the physics kills you instantly, or like in Fallout 4 when you're playing on survival mode and you accidentally bump into a car at the wrong angle and it explodes and kills you and you haven't slept in 3 hours. Fuck you, Fallout 4. Never playing survival mode again. God damn it.
There's mods.
Those are like the mini jank, the Bethesda jank, but 76 was true unadulterated jank. Like, it was just broad spectrum jank.
Well, yeah, I mean, I heard when it was first released, like, I heard that there's like no NPCs, shit like that. I'm like, I'm not gonna fucking play a Bethesda game with no NPCs. Like,
yeah, they have added NPCs, but it's.
But the fact that you have added NPCs, that's like being like, oh yeah, like they've added textures. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
great.
It's like
wow. It's a got the. Wow.
Battlefield 2042 had this thing where they had to add a scoreboard. They didn't have a scoreboard. It's Battlefield. There was no scoreboard. I know. I know. I'll put a citation needed on that just in case I'm remembering it incorrectly, but I'm pretty sure I'm not.
I haven't played a Battlefield game in years.
Yeah, man. They've gone downhill a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Like I played a little bit of Battlefield 5, a little bit of Battlefield 1. Don't get me started on the gaming naming conventions these days.
So 1 is after 5.
1 is after 5. Yeah, of course. You even have to ask that?
Well,
the last time I had a lot of fun playing Battlefield was Battlefield 4. Big time. Oh man, that's when they introduced that they called it Levolution. God, what a cringe fucking name. But basically the concept was that every level, or the majority of levels, would have some feature in the level that would, over time, over the course of a match, change the physical layout of the map by some manner of destruction. So like there was this
oh cool.
There was this map in Shanghai, and there's like a big tower in the center. And if the tower has these like 4 or 8
pillars, cement
pillars supporting it, and if you break enough of them, the tower collapses. And if you're on the tower, you die. And it becomes this kind of collapsed. The tower collapses, and it becomes this rubble area that is a continuation of the map. There's a bunch of other ones. Like there's one where it was like a series of islands, and there's like a tsunami that like takes out one of the islands, or like it pulls like a cruiser ship onto the shore, which destroys a building. Something, I don't know. A lot of crazy shit. It was, for its time, it was wild, super wild. There's actually one, not to glaze Battlefield 4 too hard, but there's one thing about Battlefield 4 that I remember that, technologically speaking, I thought was really, really cool. And I might have already mentioned it on the pod, but who cares? There was this, on that map that I mentioned where it's the series of islands, and there's like the waves, and it becomes stormier, and the waves, the tide. Tide is where it's like the periodic, like up and down.
Tide is a every 12 hours shifting thing.
Okay, so not that. Every intermittent, the waves. I guess it's the waves. I don't know why I'm getting so caught up on this. But basically, they wanted it to be that you couldn't shoot through a wave. Like you can, if you see water, or you could shoot through it, but you couldn't see through it, right? But the problem they encountered was, well, we need every player's physics to be completely synchronized in order to be certain that,
because the wave, it's like I'm looking at it, there's no wave, but you're looking at it, there's a wave. Because
with that, and that would be fucked, right? Like nobody would like that.
It's like a weird world clock, fucking
yeah. So what they ended up doing was the wave physics were server-side calculations that were sent to the client. So the server was calculating the positions of the waves, and then sending them as the same way that it would send positional player data to your client. It would send wave positional data in some way, so that two players would see the same waves and thus a wave would crest and then it would fall and they would see each other at the same time and it would be a firefight.
That's insane.
For the time, crazy technology, crazy, really cool, really impressive feature. So, yeah, that's one of my. I like going back to that story because it's. I love we've talked before about the fucking Fallout 3 train head guy and like all these weird.
I was gonna bring it up when I was talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. But
so I guess one last thing, quick. I'll just touch on it for like briefly here. But my boy Gunther Falinger is in the news again. This time he was in Albania because I guess they're having some sort of big conference in Albania. And so he was just, it was actually like really kind of like, you know, my Twitter feed is all like destruction and terrible and awful. But then it's Gunther Falinger in Albania being like, Tirana which is the capital of Albania, is the New York of the Balkans. And he's like pointing at towers, being like, look at that. That's really cool. These guys should be in the EU. And like, so I'll pop some Gunther Falinger love up on here. He's like he's a human meme, that guy. He's a human meme.
God, is he ever?
Oh, he's the best. He's the best. That fucking Duke Nukem looking fucking Austrian motherfucker.
Oh, man.
But it really does, like, he's got this positivity about him, even when he's talking about like conflict. Like, it's not like being like, oh, like positive bad.
Yeah.
Like, but I don't know how to explain it, but there's something kind of infectious about it. I guess it helps that I'm like, you know, broadly speaking, like I don't know everything about the guy's politics, but I know enough about it that we're clearly see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. And he really gives it to like, well, I told you when the Serbian president was like calling him out by name, like straight talking shit about him. Like so fucking insane. Oh, so yeah, I mean, I didn't really have much to say on that. That's got nothing to do with it. Yeah, I didn't have anything to say about that other than that. He's in Albania causing more problems and trying to get Albanians to be. He's actually trying to get Albania, Kosovo, and like I think I want to say Montenegro. Like he's trying to get a bunch of countries in the EU. He's not actually invited to the conference that's happening there. He just went.
This guy is like a geopolitical Ernest.
Yes,
Remember Ernest?
Yeah.
He's like,
yeah, he is. He is like yeah, I know. It's like,
Falinger goes to Albany.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like, what the fuck is going on with this guy? Like, this guy, is this his job? Who's paying for this, right? Like,
oh, man, it's just a little bit of surreal. It's a little surreal almost.
Well, and I mean, to be honest, like, I kind of like, I want to be paid to go travel the world and troll Serbians. You know what I mean? Like, that sounds awesome, right? Okay, well, I mean, that's, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to call it. It was a pretty heavy episode, but you know what? Like you said, important conversations, difficult conversations. Speak bravely. We have to try. We have to try and talk about them. If you stuck around through all of this, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for sticking around, being patient with us through our various hiatuses. We're going to try and keep things on track from now on. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions, critiques, or citations that we desperately needed, please leave them in the comments below, and we will see you in the next one. Welcome to the fucking podcast.